Welcome to the HIT podcast. My name is James Leighton, Managing Director and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where I bring you real life stories from some of the most interesting leaders of our sector. I want to talk about the big challenges in our sector, whether that be land, planning, diversity, inclusion, how we inspire the next generation of talent coming through. I'm delighted to be kicking off the first season with Tom Bloxham MBE, founder and chairman of Urban Splash. Tom has been responsible over the last 28 years for some of the most innovative regeneration schemes of our time. Urban Splash have recently created a new business, House by Urban Splash, and I talked to Tom at length about how that could solve some parts of the housing crisis. We talk about planning, we talk about land, we talk about how important collaboration is and how important it's been for Tom over the last 28 years. I hope you enjoy the show and I hope it gives you loads and loads of value. If you do like the show, please can I ask that you leave a review and like and subscribe. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, James. Good to be here.
Thank you for taking the time out to talk to us. Just for the benefit of the listeners, I've done you an overview, but I never quite do it justice. So can you just give us an overview of yourself, Tom?
So, overview of myself. Where do we start? I am 57, live in Manchester. Started a business called Urban Splash 28 years ago with my co-founder Jonathan Falkingham, and during that time we built up the business into being doing some quite extraordinary projects, actually, residential and commercial, big and small, based in Manchester but working throughout the country from Plymouth and South to North Shields, Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds, Birmingham, Bristol. Lots of different interesting projects, and now very much focused on modular housing with our House by Urban Splash business. Outside of the day job, I chair a thing called Manchester International Festival. It's a big arts festival on every 2 years in Manchester, building an amazing new building in the city centre called The Factory with the Architects, involved with a few charities, including the Tate and the Manchester United Foundation and a couple of private trusts. And when I'm not working, I enjoy a drink, watch United, like skiing, especially cross-country skiing. Is that good enough?
That's amazing. And I suppose just to go back then, where did this all begin? So talk us about your background and how you got into the sector, Tom. Give us an overview of that if you can.
Yeah, so I've sort of no real training. I'm probably qualified to do nothing and quite possibly unemployable. But I came to Manchester originally as a student to study politics. I was interested in politics at the time, I still am, but I suppose studying politics for 3 years teaches you quite a bit, but particularly whoever you vote for, the government always seems to get in. So I got slightly disillusioned with politics and thought maybe business was a better way to have an impact on the world. And I started by, as a skint student, trying to make some money by buying and selling records to other students. I was crap at that. But at the same time, I sort of developed a business selling posters, and I realized all the students had bare breeze block walls, wanted something to stick on their walls. At the time, the poster companies were selling, for my mind, pretty uninspiring posters. You know, Michael Jackson glossy photos, that Athena tennis player showing her bum. And perhaps, it's similar even today that the house builders, for the most part, for my money, are doing pretty uninspiring houses. And we did cool posters, from all the factory bands, the Stone Roses, we had license with the Happy Mondays, Bob Marley, cool bands, punk bands. And we started building that up into a decent business, and I ended up supplying shops like Virgin, HMV, shipping them all over the world, exporting them. But the real money was in retail, because you'd export a poster for 50p, you could wholesale it for £1.15, but you could retail it for £3. So I needed access to retail. So I was working the market stalls in the universities, I was doing Portobello Road, Camden Town Market, any market I could find, but I really wanted a shop. Nowhere would rent me a shop because I had no track record, no money, no accounts, and eventually I took hold of a space on the first and second floor, 6,000 square feet. I rented it very, very cheaply, which became Affleck's Arcade in Oldham Street, and it'd been empty like for 30 years. The previous tenant actually was Georgie Best, the footballer, the clothes shop there. And I sort of started looking around me, and at the time I saw all these amazing old buildings in Manchester which have been forgotten by the property industry. The property industry turned their back on them. Nobody lived in the city centre. Businesses were moving out of the city centre. It really was dark satanic mills, quite a depressing place to live. The shutters quite literally came down in Manchester, or Liverpool or Leeds or Newcastle for that matter at 6 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And yet there was a stock of amazing buildings. So we started renting and buying up buildings very cheaply. I joked at the time, but I was quite sure I was buying buildings cheaper than the carpet cost, and converting those. And so after our flex came a building called Juicy House, where we put a nightclub in the ground floor, a bar, restaurant, filled it with cool occupiers, 808 State, Simply Red, Ask, Properties, UK Far started there, ANS Software started there, dozens and dozens of creative industries. Similar thing in Liverpool called Liverpool Palace, filled with cream, nightclub offices, bands, record shops, bars, and then started doing residential loft apartments. And really, we were some of the first people to bring people back to live in the city centres and northern cities, converting beautiful old buildings into loft apartments, doing it very cheaply at the time, and helping to start the regeneration of Manchester and Liverpool and other city centres.
Amazing. And where did you get your inspiration from, and who did you look up to back then in terms of property and wider sectors, business sectors? Who was your idols at the time?
Well, I'm not sure they were sort of idols because, to be honest with you, most of the property industry we didn't really look to. For me, they weren't doing anything particularly exciting. Most of the architecture was pretty mundane. But you only had to go to Greenwich Village or so in New York or Paris or even London for that matter, and you saw these amazing buildings. The Docklands in London had started being developed. Terence Conran, I suppose, was probably the exception. He was
Yeah.
an incredible individual who managed to have a career in architecture, in property development, in restaurateuring, and
Yeah.
actually brought new ideas. So he was an inspiration, I suppose. And then you had a few great architects, like Richard Rogers, who we used to follow, Norman Foster, who we worked with subsequently, and you had a couple of some early architects in Manchester, people like Simpson Huff, Ian Simpson, Rachel Huff, Roger Stevenson, who's just retired, and then individuals like Jim Ramsbottom, or what he was doing in Castlefield, who sadly passed away recently. But again, he showed that with a bit of vision and determination, that you could transform areas of Manchester that were perceived as being crappy and full of scrap yards and street walkers into great places to live and work. And he said about the regeneration of Castlefield, and that was an inspiration. And so, following people like that who paved the way for companies like Urban Splash. At the same time we were doing this in Manchester, there was a guy called Harry Handelsman with Manhattan Loft Company in London, followed a very similar path. And bringing people back into city centres, but really celebrating the old historic buildings for what they were. And rather than try and change them, which many developers were doing, and putting suspended ceilings in them, letting the structure of the buildings express itself and letting people celebrate the Victorian architecture.
Yeah. And, and I mean, a lot will have changed since you've been in the industry, clearly. But what's the biggest thing that's changed in the last 25 years in the property scene, would you say?
Well, I suppose there's much more space now for imaginative developers like Urban Splash. When we started, everything was on 25-year leases.
Yeah.
It was very much a closed shop, very male dominated, and a bit public schoolish old boy network. And I think, we've still got a long way to go as an industry, but it's got a lot better, a lot more diverse, a lot more entrants with people with different backgrounds, different skills. So that's one big thing. Lease length has been much more flexible. 25-year lease were the norm. Right from day one, we've been really flexible with leases, anything from a monthly license upwards, and that's becoming much more normal now.
Yeah.
We've always been focused on the quality of the space and high ceilings, big windows, and again that's becoming more normal. So I suppose whereas when we started we were very much the mavericks, and the lunatics on the edge of the asylum. Now the asylum's full with many more normal people. Everyone's becoming a lunatic like us.
and which period of that time did you look back on most fondly, would you say? Which was the bit where you felt you're most creative, you're most innovative in that 25 years, would you say?
Well, I wouldn't, I hope and think we're still now as innovative and creative as we ever have been. I mean, the times are changing. We're a much bigger organisation now, but we've got more resources, so we can do more interesting things. And so, the work we're doing with modular housing, I think, is really exceptional. The
Yeah.
work we're doing with studying our embedded carbon and moving towards carbon zero, I think, is really exciting. The way we're trying to move to digital, entirely digital and paper free, I think is exciting. And some of the work we're doing on architectures is as exciting now as anything we've ever done. And hopefully, as we get older and hopefully wiser, we've got a lot of experience we can bear down on. We become better and better connected. We know more and more people in the industry. We're able to make things happen, and we're better resourced. Added to which, we're surrounding ourselves with very bright young people, full of ideas, and people who, like us, want to change the world and make the world a slightly better place.
Yeah, it leads me on nicely that actually, Tom, because when I was doing my research, and I obviously know the business very well, but you have created some fantastic people over those years. And one thing that I think you've done really well is develop young leaders quite well. How have you done that? What's been the secret to your success in that, would you say?
I always say I give people enough rope to hang themselves by, and I think it's very much about encouraging ideas. And absolutely, we don't have a monopoly on good ideas. We are a very devolved business. We encourage everybody in the business to come up with ideas.
Yeah.
The people closer to the customers, the people closer to the suppliers, they know best what's wrong, what we can improve, how we can improve better. They know far better than I do how to make our business better, and we encourage them. We give them as much authority as we can. We give them as much responsibility as we can. And you'll see there's a whole legacy of people who often come into Urban Splash at a young age in very lowly positions and have risen up, both in Urban Splash and gone on to do other things. People like Nick Johnson, who set up Altrincham Market, Mackie Mayer, and if you look in other exciting companies, like Capital and Centric or Far East Corporation, they're full of people who learned their craft at Urban Splash.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you think we inspire the next generation? Because it's evident to me, and one reason that I do this podcast is I want to inspire that next generation of talent coming through. But it's clearly there's other sectors now that people out of school get pushed towards your tech and your other industries. How do we make housing and specifically the property industry more appealing to the younger generation, do you think?
Yeah, I think hopefully by being open to them. It's always I was talking to a friend the other day that these tech overnight billionaires seem incredible, and young people seem more and more impatient to do something and get rich quick. I think the great thing about properties, you're making a lasting impression. If we design our homes well and we make them right, we're going to improve the quality of life for everybody who lives in there, and
Yeah.
fundamentally change that. If we do our buildings right, they'll last longer than we last, and they'll make a positive impact on our towns and cities for generations to come. And so I think the ability to leave a legacy, the ability to change the world, the ability, like you had to swear when you became City of Athens, to leave our cities and towns a little bit better, more beautiful than we found them, is
Yeah.
something which probably uniquely alone the property industry can offer individuals. And increasingly, we're seeing that people who want to come and work with Urban Splash, together, to be fair, with the customers and even the investors who want to lend us money, are more and more concerned about the company's values, about the impact on the environment,
Yeah.
about our values, our social outlook. And I think all those things that are becoming increasingly important, things that Urban Splash have always been bothered about, perhaps we haven't articulated them historically. We've always been very worried about them, trying to make a positive impact on society, on our cities. And now I think they're becoming more and more important, more and more talked about, and hopefully that will play to Urban Splash's strengths.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that you're spot on there. I think you have always been big on your ESG, and it feels like the in vogue statement at the moment, but clearly you've been doing a lot of that for generations. If we go to the present day, then just give us a helicopter view of Urban Splash as we stand here today. And I know there's been some changes over the years, but what does the business look like today in terms of the group?
Yeah, so I think we call it about a family of companies now, and at the
Yeah.
centre of it is the shareholding directors, myself and Jonathan and Nathan and Julian and Simon. And around that, we developed a family of businesses, a group of businesses. So we've got the traditional historic Urban Splash, which is taking fantastic old buildings and converting those. So we're currently on site with buildings like Royal William Yard in Plymouth. We
Yeah.
just finished the most amazing big lofts, Avro lofts in Manchester. We're on site in Sheffield with Park Hill, doing another 2 phases of that. So taking great landmark buildings, and historically we've done Midland Hotel in Morecambe, Fort Dunlop in Birmingham, and the Rotunda in Birmingham, Lister Mills in Bradford, and so we're continuing those sorts of buildings. We've also got a big commercial side. We own over 1 million square feet of commercial property,
Yeah.
mostly managed workspace. Very similar to perhaps what WeWork are doing. I'd argue much more authentic than WeWork, full of really creative businesses on flexible terms. We try to get very, very close to our customers in those. We manage them. We do the maintenance all in house. We then got our modular house building business, which is House by Urban Splash. So we demerged that a couple of years ago. We took on investment from an enormous Japanese company called Sekisui House, and Homes England, part of the UK government, are minority shareholders. And that we're trying to really grow quickly to build our MMC, Modern Methods Construction, modular homes around the country. We're active there, I think, on 12 different sites. Sites in New Islington and Manchester, Portloop in Birmingham, Northstowe, Cambridge. Just finished the Smith's Dock in the northeast. About to start in Grappenhall in Warrington. We've got a site in Milton Keynes, and several other sites around the country. So that's really exciting. And then we've also recently launched a urban splash residential fund.
Yeah.
And that's really so we can provide homes to rent as well as for sale. And there we're working with some friends and family investors. They've wanted to invest alongside the management in Urban Splash, buying our completed homes, renting those out, and that's showing very good returns for our investors, but also providing a new form of residential property, great quality Urban Splash homes for rent as well as for sale. We've got a charitable trust. We've got Future Lab, which is a bit of a sort of think tank where we're experimenting with new ideas, what the future of housing might look like, how we can reduce our carbon input. I've probably forgotten one or two parts of it.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so much going on in that mix. But in terms of focusing on Urban Splash and House by Urban Splash, because I know there's a big focus on that at the moment, where did that idea originate from? Was that something that the board of directors decided they wanted to do? Did you naturally fall into it? Where did that originate from?
Well, there's a couple of things really. We had a very tough time in the last financial crisis after 2008, global financial crisis. And I was worried during that time, would we ever be able to borrow the tens of millions of pounds you need to build these big buildings? And if you're building a big block of flats, you've got to get the whole thing finished before you get any cash in.
Yeah.
And we started to think about housing. We'd done Chimney Pot Park, and we thought, actually, if we're going to do new build housing, what would it look like? And we started from first principles with a blank piece of paper. And we realised most companies are still building houses, no different to the Romans did, with bricks, wet cement bricks.
Yeah.
And everything else in our lives has been built in factories, and we've changed the way we're building things. And most other products have improved so much over the last 100 years. Look at television, for instance. You look at television 100 years ago, it was enormous, it was expensive, it had a tiny screen, it was black and white, it's poor reception. Now every time you buy a new television, it's twice as big as the old one, it's twice as thin, it's better quality, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And yet our new build houses are getting more and more expensive, arguably no better and arguably smaller. So how can we change that? How can we change it? How can we give better value for money? How can we make housing in the long term more affordable? And we thought industrial production must be the way forward.
Yeah.
And so 3 years ago, we acquired the modular business from a big company called SRG PLC. And we started working with that. And then sort of 2 years ago, we realized that as a relatively small private northern company, if we really wanted to expand this business, we needed to take on some help, some investment, some firepower from other people. We searched around the world of who knew the most about modular housing, who would be the best partners.
Yeah.
And we picked Sekisui House, a £10 billion Japanese company. They're bigger than the top 4 house builders in the UK combined. They have 1,000 people working in the R&D department. They employ 3,000 architects in-house. Massive company, but very similar values to ours. Very focused on sustainability, very focused on biodiversity, very focused on quality. And so we agreed to deal with them where they took a 35% stake. And then we also approached the government through Homes England, part of UK government, to take a 5% stake. And we thought actually that would give us a huge stamp of credibility and particularly a lot of the land we get gets comes from the public sector, comes from local authorities, and we like working in partnership with local authorities and regional governments to see how can we work with them to provide more housing of all sorts of different tenures.
Yeah. Okay. And quite a lot there, but certainly from what I can see from Sekasui is that you're aligned on ESG and what we just talked about from that corporate piece, but also really aligned in the way you build. So the one thing I found fascinating by being lucky enough to go and look at lots of your schemes always seem to be water featured in a lot of your schemes, but also you put the community at the heart of most of the schemes. Is that by design or is that just a coincidence? What help us understand that a little.
That's certainly by design. I mean, ultimately, when we look at any scheme, we sort of think about, would I want to live there? Would I want to work there? And if we can't answer yes to that, we don't do it. And so in every one of our schemes, there's something special. It's either canal side or it's got historic buildings, or it's got amazing views or great topography. There's something that's amazing about every one of our schemes. Great countryside, and that is always, blue and green. Our organising thought is live well by design. And I think if we focus on how people live, then it's going to make a real difference to them and it's going to make our homes desirable. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of it is, as we say, blue and green. So next to outdoor space, next to parks, next to gardens. And we try to have a hierarchy of space in all our homes. So we try and achieve that every home has got a bit of private space, private garden, a terrace, a balcony, where you can have a barbecue, invite your friends around, some communal space, which you share with the other residents immediately around there. So maybe a safe place where the kids can play, where they can meet other kids, where you can have communal activities, share the garden, not have to worry about the gardening because it's done for you, but also public space, a public park, Cottonfield Park in Manchester, Portloop Park, very important for us. And so everybody in the community, not just the people who buy from us, but all the locals can come and enjoy that space and activities. And then we try to work with local community groups. So in Portloop in Birmingham, we're working with Front Room, an Impact Hub, where they're doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things, putting kayak lessons on for kids, doing treasure hunts, having a free bike repair scheme to encourage people to cycle,
Awesome.
all sorts of community events, park plays. In Irwell Riverside in Salford, we're working with an artist collective called Paradise Paradise Works, where artist studios are adjacent. There we had worked with a charity called Quarantine, who set up an artist house with artists in residence who work in the community. We've got Yard House in Portloop, again a black arts collective working in the community, doing different arts projects. So all the time we try to act as a catalyst to encourage neighbours to meet each other, to encourage neighbours to play a part in the community. In Newsington, we sponsored a free school, so we've got Manchester Newsington Free School, Ofsted Outstanding, amazing school. I was there last week, and we helped them get a new football pitch, all-weather football pitch. Amazing head teacher. She was saying 21 different nationalities in the school,
Wow.
appealing to kids from city centre Manchester, but also to some quite tough neighbourhoods in East Manchester, and some amazing results. Another thing that we can actually help with it. In some ways, we do it sort of through a philanthropic gesture, but there's also enlightened self-interest that
Yep.
we realise there's a great school offset outstanding in the neighbourhood. Then people with kids are going to want to, rent and buy homes in the area, and it's going to help. It's going to help everybody.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because I'm from Manchester, clearly, and what you've done with the Cardroom estate and how you've created New Islington, where does that vision come from? Because, I mean, it's very difficult to look back at that period in time. I knew the area well and think this is going to be a really affluent area where everyone wants to live in 10, 15, 20 years. So how do you see that and how do you have the vision to see that?
It is very much about exactly what you say, a vision. So we start off talking to the local authorities typically and usually engage at the lead or chief executive level. We engage the local community. We find out what they like, what they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. And we sit down with all the stakeholders. Now, inevitably, you don't keep everybody happy all the time and nobody gets everything they want.
Of course.
But, a lot of things we can do. We then work with really talented architects, and we're good because the best architects in the world want to work with us. And we then think about a master plan. So in Newsington, for instance, it was taking the old Cardinal estate, but either side of it there was a canal. So in retrospect, an obvious idea of connecting the two existing canals with a new canal, putting a marina in, putting an island in, putting in houseboats,
Yeah.
having a great south-facing promenade where you've got shops like Pollen Bakery, the best bakery in Manchester. You've got Cask Wheel Ale. We're opening a whole lot of new restaurants and bars there, just to create a really interesting collection. And then work not just Urban Splash, but bring in other developers who share our values and can work with us to develop the area quicker. And I won't say it's all been easy, and we've had some troubles. It's taken us a long time. We're 20 years in now and still not quite finished, but it will be finished. And when it is finished, it is going to be amazing. And I mean, you're right. We have transformed what was one of the worst parts of Manchester into what will be one of the best parts of Manchester. Listed, I think, by the Times, one of the six best places to live in the world.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And that gives us a real sense of joy. And I think that's why people want to invest in urban splash properties. Why people want to come and work alongside us, and why hopefully people, bankers and people want to lend us money to carry on doing these exciting projects.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that you've done a really good job of blending in the products that you have there in terms of Mansion House and the modular stuff that you've done there with the traditional build that already exists there. So I think that's important, isn't it, to have that broader view in terms of the architecture that exists within the area as well.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, and many people think the job of planners is to keep things in keeping with what's surrounding. But actually, you look at most of the best places that I like, whether that's a medieval village or St Mark's Square in Venice or historic parts of London. The buildings are so diverse. There's nothing in keeping with them. You've got
Yeah.
big buildings, you've got small buildings, you've got modern buildings, you've got Georgian against Victorian against Gothic, and it works really well. And so I think there's real space for a variety of architectural styles. We're agnostic about style. We just want quality. And for us, when we say quality in architecture, I'm not talking about colour or decoration. I'm talking about simple things like double aspect homes where the wind can go blow right through them, like high ceilings, like big windows, like great views, like not being overlooked.
Yeah.
So there are lots of really simple things that we try to design into all our homes, making them sustainable, making them efficient, making them well insulated. And this is what design for me is all about, not about fashion or fad or colour.
Yeah. And how do you still keep that brilliant design but create a modular concept that can be repeatable, but not only repeatable but quick? How do you make all them things work together?
By working with great, clever designers and great individuals, and there's space for repetition. People sometimes say, well, aren't people going to be bored of your house all the same? But I sort of go back by that with a couple of things. One is they're not all the same. There are lots of different ways you can clad them and put the covers on them. But also, if you look at the ubiquitous Georgian terrace, that occurs all over the UK and it's beautiful and it stood the test of time.
Yep.
Or London Victorian terraces. Again, they work really well. The terrace is super efficient. It's practical. Had the test of time. It works in crescents, in squares, in terraces, in streets. And for me, it's much, much more successful than today's cul-de-sac, which I think is car dominated, is boring, gives nothing back to the street, and I think there's much better street plans driven from mansion house typologies, driven from terrace typologies, which will make much better towns and cities than this never-ending, boring, mundane cul-de-sac that we see so much of.
Yeah, and how have you found the challenges that exist within modular? Because I feel like a lot of the people I speak to, and I would have 4 years ago been one of these people, but now I'm such a believer of the modular concept. But the challenges people talk about are cost and the price of it, and how we're going to get to scale so that it's cost effective for the developer, but also for the end consumer. What have you seen as been the main challenges for that area of your business, the modular part of the business?
Sure, they are all challenges, and I mean the honest answer is we could have built every one of our modular homes conventionally and saved a whole load of money doing it. But I believe it's the future. When people first built cars, they were hand built. Yeah, going into factory production line would have cost them a lot of money.
Yeah.
But ultimately, of course, it's the way forward. every other part of our lives has been improved through industrial processes, through mass production, through working in a factory in much safer conditions with tighter tolerances and better quality control and more diverse workforce has got to be better than building houses out in the elements, battling the wind and the rain. And particularly in the UK now, you've got a real skill shortage coming up. We've got our builders who are typically in their 50s and nearing retirement.
Yep.
Immigrant labour has gone back home to a large extent. So, there's a time bomb here waiting to happen. And actually skilling up a new set of skilled workers who are much more comfortable working in heated factories, not reliant on good weather, has got to be the future. And even sort of sauces that our mothers would have made in the kitchen, we're now buying from supermarkets in tins and jars. So everything is being industrialised.
Yep.
Housing is sort of the last bastion relying on itinerant labour that went out in most trades in the Middle Ages. And I believe it's the future. So we're investing in the future. At the moment, it is still expensive, but I think as we get the production rates up, as we get the capacity up, as we get our pipeline growing, as we improve our skills, as we move on with our Mark III townhouse now, as we move on to further marks and keep improving, relentless improvement. We're making mistakes, yes, but actually we're learning from each of those mistakes and getting better and better and better. So now the Mark III townhouse is very much better than the Mark I.
Yeah, and it's an evolution of process, isn't it? And I think as you learn and implement new things on new schemes, like I've seen that myself. I was Piercy Street as an example, where within a couple of weeks you'd loaded all the houses in, and it was a complete scheme 2 weeks later. I mean, that's incredible amounts of speed, and if you can do that and replicate that across the country, then it's going to be an interesting journey. What would you like to see for your House by Urban Splash business? What does the future look like? What would you want to be known for in 5, 6, 7 years time?
Yeah, I mean, the Piercy Street example you use is a very good example. There was a bit of land which was owned by the Manchester City Council. I'm not
Yeah.
even sure they realised they owned it, to be honest with you, just using social behaviour. We approached them within a year. We sort of approached them. We agreed to buy it. We got planning. We got them fully built. The actual house only takes 14 days in the factory to get
Oh,
built.
yeah.
And then you can assemble two or three in a single day. So literally, apparently, the postman went past one day, no houses. A week later, there's a whole street of houses up there. So I mean, it's quite incredible. And we want to use these skills. Now we've got our factory set up, building homes all over the country. We want to, as we grow in capacity and we put more and more throughput to the factory, we want them to become more and more affordable. We want to provide them on different tenures, so
Yep.
for sale, for rent, and also for affordable housing. We want people who live in them to really enjoy it. We want to improve the quality of people's lives. And, we believe we can grow this business into a very big business. We're at the moment, we've got a business plan to grow it ultimately up to 3,000 homes a year. Sounds a lot, but it's actually only a 1% market share. And, if we get to a 1% market share, that'll be a very large business.
Yeah.
That will take us a number of years to get there, but we're growing it. We're winning more land. We're putting more production through our factories. We're recruiting some great young people, and so step by step, bit by bit, we're growing the business and making it better and better.
Yeah, and I saw a stat that said that Savills had come out and said that they think by 2030 that there'll be 20% modular houses out there in the market, which feels like a massive proportion of house building at the moment.
Yes, certainly, in many countries overseas, there are 20, 30, 40% even of houses
Wow.
built using MMC methods. And so, Holland, Scandinavia, Japan, America, most countries or most advanced countries are far ahead of the UK in terms of modular.
Yeah.
Now, there'll always be a place for brick and block, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's a great process, and the house builders are making fortunes, so they can't be doing everything wrong. And I think what we're providing additionality is not instead of traditional house builders. That's
Of course.
fine, and I don't want to knock anybody. But what we're doing is additionality, and the government. We've got a big shortage of 300,000 homes a year in the UK. The government have been trying to push the house builders to build more. Give them carrots, give them sticks. Nothing's actually changed, and actually fewer and fewer house builders are building more and more homes. But the total number of homes we're building is not growing up, and so using companies like Urban Splash will allow us to build more homes. I think the other thing is, there's a lot of clever money now going into modular construction. LNG are investing heavily. Goldman Sachs have invested. Um, TDR have invested.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of, Sekisui House invested. There are a lot of very wealthy organisations now looking at the sector, and I think it's a sector that will grow, and we want to be part of that story. We want to be leading the change. We want to be pushing forward the future. Um, we want to be, creating the future and
Yeah.
not jumping onto bandwagons,
And
because
it's interesting that from a sorry to look at the marketplace at the moment, house builders don't work together collaboratively. There's competition there, but the modular companies seem to be really collaborating at the moment and really learning from each other's successes and mistakes and driving that industry forward. That's nice to see, isn't it, for the sector to work together?
Yeah, and now listen, I'm a natural collaborator there, yeah, and I think there's no point keeping secrets or being hidden, because people want to find out, they'll find ways to find out. So I'm naturally, our door is open. We like to share information, and we've got far more to learn from each other than we've got to fear from each other. Combined, we're still only a tiny percentage of the market.
Yeah.
So there's a huge scope for us to learn. So yeah, I mean, we've been, Business been instrumental in getting together, if you like, rivals, LNG, Top Hat, Ilkey, Lang O'Rourke, great companies, and forming Make Modular,
Yeah.
just as a trade association, which I think will be exciting. And I think we've got lots to learn from each other. We're all of us making mistakes, often different mistakes. And we are natural collaborators. We always have been. Hopefully, we always will be.
Yeah, and on that collaboration and partnership, if we just take Sekisui as an example, what have you learned so far from your partners over in Japan, and what have they brought to the business in terms of value so far, rather than just the investment?
Yeah, so I mean, they're great partners to have. They're really focused on ESG. They're really focused on biodiversity. They're really focused on sustainability, and housing in the era of 100-year lifespan is what they talk about. And so they are helping us with the technology. They use a different technology in Japan than we use in the UK, but we're seeing
Right.
the scope to share more technology. They're helping us with the mechanical processes. And of course, you don't get to be a company as big as they do without lots of clever people in there with good ideas. And so they are looking at our systems and our processes and helping us refine those, and helping us set the ambition of growing the business.
And I'm right in thinking, I mean, I had to check my stats here, but 2.5 million homes they built through MMC. Is that right?
They built 2.5 million homes in total, and the majority of
Yeah.
those are MMC. They're not all MMC, but
And
that's
then
right. So,
80%, 87% of them homes net zero energy,
uh,
which is insane.
yeah, correct. So, again, lots we can learn from them. And of course, earthquake proof as well, which is
That's
less
all.
less necessary in the UK than it is in Japan. But again, it gives you an insight into their thinking, that if they can build houses, some great photos of areas in Japan where they've had earthquakes and all the competitors' houses have fallen down, and the
Really?
secondary house homes are the only one left standing after the earthquake. And that's really how they built their reputation in Japan, through the quality of the construction. And that's a great legacy that we can build on.
Yeah, and a quick word on places for people, Tom. They've been early adopters, haven't they, of the MMC methodology? But I know you've got a great partnership there. How does that work, and how beneficial is that to both parties?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a great partnership with Place for People. We've done a number of schemes with them, uh, both MMC in places like Smithstock and Port Loop, and also conventional in places like Park Hill and Lakeshore in Bristol. And I think it's quite interesting. In many ways, urban splash values are more similar to many housing associations than they are to many private sector developers. And we're very much about quality of life. We're very much about improving the environment. So we make natural bedfellows. Very entrepreneurial housing association, Place for People. And
Yeah,
again, big balance sheet, which is great to have the source of their capital behind us. A real desire on placemaking, entrepreneurial leadership under a guy called David Cowans. So again, it's been good working with them in partnership. Together, we've been building thousands of homes and creating some real quality of homes and transforming places and really leaving a positive legacy.
Amazing. And on that point, where are you up to in your sustainability journey at the moment? You know, when we talk about net zero homes, it's a big vogue topic at the moment in the marketplace. But whereabouts are you on that journey currently as a business?
Yeah, so I mean, we're really interested in it. We've always been, I suppose, like you said, we always know ESG. We never knew what ESG was, to be honest with you, Tony, a couple of years ago. But we've always tried to give something back to society. We've always encouraged other people. We've always, as individuals, both been on charities and trusts. We've always supported artists where we've worked. We've always, put on festivals, done exhibitions,
Yeah.
supported local community groups, and we've always been really focused on placemaking and leaving a positive impact. I suppose what the ESG thing has done is started to teach us how to measure that and how to talk about it in a more coherent way.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, we're doing some studies with Arabs on the embodied energy, embodied carbon in our homes, which has been really positive results. We've not published them yet, but
Right.
that's really quite spectacular. And we're way ahead of the competition, we think.
Okay.
We are, talking about a journey to carbon zero. It's how you measure it, and some people simply offset. I'm not at all sure. I believe in just offsetting. And so, we still got lots to learn. There's more we can be doing. There's always more we can be doing, but we're on a journey and we're very much committed to it. I'm very much committed to, leaving our planet a slightly better place than we found it.
Amazing. And one of the big challenges that people talk to me about a lot, and I'm not one to be bashing our planning system, but clearly people talk a lot about land and development at the moment, and the planning being the part that's really slowing down developments. What's your thoughts on what we could do to try and improve that as a country and as a planning industry?
So, I mean, it's a tricky one. And again, developers always go on there and always complain about the planning system. I mean, I suppose the first thing to say is we've always had a very good relationship with planners. Most
Yeah.
local authorities love it when they see Urban Splash coming in there because they know we're genuine about making a difference. So usually we have a very positive, I mean, I think, there's some fundamental problems. And actually, the head chief planner in many countries is second only to the mayor in importance. And they come up with a plan for the area, and sort of whether that plan is Houseman's Paris or Bourneville or Saltaire or Port Sunlight in the UK. These are great planning communities that I love. I think the problem now is a lot of the time the planning departments have become under resourced and they become development control. And actually, sadly, the nature of the system, through unintended consequences, is one of rewarding mediocrity. And actually, the way often to get planning is to do, annoy the least possible people. There's a big voice of NIMBYism. And so doing things that are mediocre is often the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a big one to shout for a much more planned system, to think about what's important, to focus much more on quality of the environment, much more on placemaking. And, I think it's probably time we had a radical shake-up of the system. The other thing to say is how complicated and lengthy it is. When I started in business, to do, I don't know, 100 home development probably cost us 50 grand in planning costs and took us
Right.
3 months. The same one probably costs us 500 grand now and takes us 15 months.
Yeah.
So, it really is getting much more expensive, much more time consuming and much slower, which really serves nobody.
It sucks up cash as well, doesn't it? Like nobody, having all that money sat there waiting to develop these schemes, and clearly without selling properties on the land, you're not making any money at that stage, are you? So it stops you from developing more areas, doesn't it?
It does.
And just a quick shout on materials, Tom, because again, people keep talking about the hike in materials at the moment. Are you seeing that at an urban splash level or not at the moment?
We're definitely seeing inflation on materials. I think everybody's seeing that.
Yeah.
Um, we are yet to see whether that's a permanent trend or short term. But I do think that we are going to see many more inflationary pressures in the years ahead, partly because of all the quantitative easing we've seen from governments, but also we've seen sort of downward pressure on all the manufactured goods as people have gone further and further east to get them produced. More and more stuff's gone to China. But I think we're sort of coming to the end of that route now. People have been producing stuff first of all in England, then in Eastern Europe, and then in India, then in China, and then in deepest, darkest China. And that's sort of finished now. And Chinese wages rightly are going up, and standard of living in China is going up. So
Yeah.
we're going to see some real inflationary pressures, I think, on everything. We hope that's going to be particularly hardly hit on traditional build because of the added inflation with labour costs. So, we hope modular will be able to mitigate part of that through increased efficiencies. And again, if you see a graph that manufacturing has increased efficiency per person output by about 30% over the last 30 years, but
Yeah.
actually construction has had no increases in efficiency over the last 30 years. So again, we'd hope to see some of that. But, I think we are going to see some inflationary pressures in everything we see.
Yeah, fair enough. And just as we last couple of things, as we look to the future, what do you see we need to change in the market? If you had one option and one thing you could change, what would it be? Would it be the planning, or would it be something else that you would change in the market?
Well, I mean, there are lots of things. I think more choice from consumers, more entrants so they can vote with their feet and vote with their wallets
Yeah,
and pick really well designed homes. I think there's a homogeneity of the market, particularly in houses, less so in apartments, that whoever you're buying from is more or less the same sort of product, or appears to that to me. I really want to see a multi-tenure dwellings. And so at the moment, I want to see whether it's an affordable house or shared ownership or for rent or for sale. Why isn't that all the same design? Why isn't that in the same street?
yeah,
More, mixing in society. In my experience, where you get ghettos of very poor people and sink estates, you have all sorts of problems that aren't great. But equally, where you get ghettos of very rich people in walled communities and not particularly great places to live. And most of us like living in really mixed communities where you mix
agree.
with all sorts of different people. So I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more municipal building, to be honest with you, by local authorities, but actually working with the private sector to use the best skills in the private sector by allowing ownership where necessary to stay in the public sector. I think they're natural owners. I'd like to see more innovative design, more different typologies of modular, steel, concrete, wood.
Yeah,
So I think there's lots of exciting things to happen. More young development companies coming up. Where are the urban splashes of the future? Who are the young developers coming in? I think it's probably harder to start now than when I started. More use of technology. Become totally paperless and more digital first. More use of landscaping. I think landscaping, planting trees is really important.
yeah,
Um, More areas that are focused on people rather than cars. We've still got ambition to build a car-free development at some stage, and hopefully before too long, where we have no cars inside development. So, there are lots of exciting things which we are looking at, which we are working at, but just taking one step at a time.
yeah. And do you see the growth of Urban Splash? I mean, you've already got your commercial offering and other parts of the business, but do you see the growth of the business now becoming the Resi Fund and the house business? Is that where you see the main growth areas in the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's harder and harder to find interesting old buildings. I think that part of the building
Yeah,
will continue going, but probably
of
continue
course.
going the same sort of size it is at the moment. The modular housing business, big ambitions to grow that. The Resi Fund, big ambitions to grow that. Both of those I think will become £1 billion businesses in a few years' time. So we're really pushing forward on many fronts of those, but trying to keep the same spirit, the same soul, the same values across the Urban Splash family of businesses, through the brand, through the values, live well by design is sort of an organizing thought, getting the culture right, attracting the right people to come and work for us,
Yeah,
bright, ambitious individuals. For us, attitude is always much more important than skill sets. If people are bright, we can teach them anything. But we want people with the right values, the right attitude, who are hardworking, who are optimistic, who want
yeah.
to make a positive impact on the planet. They're the sort of people who want to come and work with us.
Yeah, and final thing, and a nice way to finish is when COVID hit, and obviously it's been a difficult year from a health perspective. I was probably in the position that I thought the market was going to really suffer, and that's not actually been what's happened. But what do you see happening over the next couple of years? What do you think will happen in UK housing in the next couple of years from a market perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The fundamentals of the housing market are very strong in that we've got a growing population, a shortage of houses. So the fundamental supply and demand is favourable for the house building business. I thought COVID was interesting. I think it's accelerated a lot of change already happening. And clearly hearts go out for anybody who's been directly affected, who's got sick or
Yeah, of course.
passed away from it. But it's brought some changes, and in many ways we were by no means the worst hit. I feel for my friends in hospitality business, we got our factories and sites going very quickly after a couple of weeks of closure. We were getting close to full capacity, probably working at 90% capacity and 110% of cost. So I'm not sure we made any money during it, but we
Yeah.
kept everybody busy and we kept building much needed houses. What I've also seen is the things that urban splash have always focused on about communal spaces, about bigger homes, about higher ceilings, about green space, about outside space,
Yeah.
about space to socialize in, are becoming increasingly important. What's been great to see is how the streets have closed and they've been taken over by restaurants and people and pedestrians rather than cars, which I think is positive, and maybe we can keep some of that. I think it's been great how we found new ways of working. We've been managed to work from home. I've been doing Zoom calls with my 80-year-old parents. Amazing. Who would have guessed
Amazing.
that would happen a couple of years ago? So, there's been some positivity, and I think the challenge for us now is to keep those positive parts, to move forward and keep making a positive impact on the world.
Amazing. And what a great way to finish. Thank you very much for your time, Tom. I've really enjoyed that.
Thanks, everybody. Lovely. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Thanks,
Take care.
James, for organising the podcast.
Cheers, Tom.